We're going to cover another type of loop in Python, the for loop. A while loop runs based on a condition. A for loop repeats a specific number of times, which makes it ideal for tasks where you know exactly how many iterations are needed. A for loop is used to iterate over a sequence, like a list or a range of numbers, and it runs the same block of code for each item in the sequence. The most common use case for a for loop is when you need to repeat something a certain number of times. Here's a basic structure of a for loop. The loop goes through each item in the sequence and runs the code inside the loop for every item. In Python, sequences can be things like lists, tuples, or even ranges of numbers. Let's apply this concept to something practical. Imagine you want to schedule regular maintenance for a car over the next 5 years. You can use a for loop to print out a maintenance schedule for each year. Here's how we can write a for loop that prints out the maintenance schedule for the next 5 years. Let's leave a comment so we know this is where we learned about for loops. I'll write out the syntax, then we'll talk about what each of these components do. In this example, the for loop will iterate over the range of numbers from 1 to 5. For each year, it prints out a message saying that regular maintenance is required. The range 1, 6 function generates the numbers 1 through 5, with the last number 6 not included. Let's run this program and see how it works. When we run the code, the for loop prints a message for each year, scheduling regular maintenance for the next 5 years. As you can see, the loop runs 5 times, once for each year, and prints out the message for each iteration. For loops are ideal when you know exactly how many times you need to run the code. In this case, we're repeating the task 5 times, once for each year in the maintenance schedule. For loops can also be used to iterate over other sequences like lists. Let's say we want to check a list of car parts that need to be replaced during maintenance. I'll create a variable that will contain the list of parts. To create a list, we'll just use the bracket. So we'll do brake pads. And oil filter. So the comma separates each individual item in the list. We can now use a for loop to be able to go through each item in the list. So I'll say for part, in parts needed, and then we can print out each item in the list. In this example, the for loop iterates over the parts needed list. For each part in the list, it prints a message saying that part needs to be replaced during maintenance. Let's run it to see what it looks like. The for loop goes through the list of parts and prints a replacement message for each one. As you can see, for loops are very flexible. They allow you to iterate over a sequence of numbers, like in the maintenance schedule example, or over a list of items, like the part replacement example. To recap, a for loop repeats a block of code for each item in a sequence. The sequence can be a range of numbers, a list of items, or any other iterable. For loops are great when you know exactly how many times you need to repeat a task, whether it's checking each item in a list or repeating an action a set number of times.